Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Hey there, and welcome to You've Been Selected. I'm your host, Kate Vitella, and something tells me you didn't just stumble across this podcast by accident. Maybe, just maybe, you've been called here, like selected by the universe for something more. So let's get started. Okay, welcome back to another episode of You've Been Selected. Today I have an awesome guest. I'm excited to have you on. Her name is Celeste. Celeste Yvonne is a writer and a certified recovery coach, IAPRC, whose essays on parenting, the mental load of motherhood, and sobriety have been featured in the Washington Post, Good Morning America, Today Show, and Refinery 29, among others. Her book, It's Not About the Wine, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture, addresses why women are drinking more than ever and how to break free. She is also a contributing writer to the Wall Street Journal and Publishers Weekly bestseller, So God Made a Mother. More than 7 years sober, Celeste advocates for mothers who struggle with addiction and mental health. She lives in Nevada with her husband and her 2 children. Welcome, Celeste.
Hi, Kate.
Yay,
Thanks for
I'm
having
so
me.
happy to have you.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so we go back quite a few years. I feel like you've been a part of my sober journey since I met you, 5 years ago, I think.
Right at COVID? Is that
Yes.
how it all began?
Yeah, so we got to know each other through the Sober Mom Squad, which was a paid membership for mothers who were sober curious, and then we met personally, I think, for the first time, the only time, in Miami at She Recovers.
Which feels like forever ago.
It does, doesn't it? It does. I was looking back at old pictures and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I remember that." It feels like years and years ago, but, so you were one of the founding members of Sober Mom Squad. So you had a sort of a lot of eyes on you at that time, and that was before you wrote your most recent book, or is that your only book?
Yeah, I mean, I put together like my 10 most popular essays and created a book out of it, but I really consider It's Not About the Wine to be my one and only book.
Yeah, because I remember meeting you and already knowing you are a writer. You know,
Mhm.
you were contributing to these big outlets, and, we all as members had read bits and pieces of your writing and just really loved it, and your Instagram, the Ultimate Mom Challenge, like, lots of followers there, and so coming into Sober Mom Squad, you were already a bit of a public figure.
I had been writing for a while at that point. I would say I was fairly new in the sober space, uh, and still trying to find my footing as far as, do I want to write about this? Is this something I want to do behind the scenes? I really wasn't sure. You know how much stigma and kind of self-shame we carry in the beginning of recovery. I was afraid of this being a key part of my identity, and that really stifled me in my recovery writing, in the first few years.
Ooh, the coach in me is lighting up. Tell me exactly what you were afraid of.
Right? Well, so many things. I mean, the same things that I was worried about when I first quit, which is, what if I'm wrong? What if this really isn't a problem and I just proclaimed myself to be in recovery of something I never needed to be in recovery for? I just needed a break. You know,
Oh,
those voices you have in your head that convince you that this is dumb or this is just temporary.
yeah,
And I was very afraid my first year of recovery, that if people knew what I was doing, or why I was doing it, I would be doomed to sit at the proverbial kids' table for the rest of my life because I had put it out there, that I have a problem with alcohol, and I could never take that back.
yeah, yeah. Was there a lot of stigma in the writing space that you were afraid of?
It wasn't so much in the writing space as in, I think, the walls I had built around what addiction means and what recovery means from my own family and my own father's addiction journey, and watching his journey and the walls built around him and our family based on uh, what we all kind of looked at was his weakness or what made him sick. And I did not want that in my own life. I didn't want to be looked at that way. I didn't want the feelings that came with how I believed that must feel. And I didn't want to live a life doomed to what I perceived as church basements and weak coffee and standing in front of a room telling people I am powerless
Mhm.
over a substance that I believed at the time I had full control over.
Wow. Well, I mean, to give you credit there, it wasn't so much that you believed there was only the option of church basements. The reality was, before groups like Sober Mom Squad, that's all there really was. I mean, pre-pandemic, I was in the rooms of AA, and that's all there was available. I mean, there might have been a few, like, hit or miss online meetings. There was in the rooms a giant online group for free meetings, but it was basically AA online. So, yeah, there really wasn't anything, and so that fear is real because for so many of us pre-pandemic, we had one option.
Right? And that label terrified me. This label of alcoholic, and feeling like it would be like a scarlet letter I would have to carry for the rest of my life. And seeing my dad carry that around with him, hold on to it with, you know, a very major sense of shame because my
Yeah.
father never did find firm footing in a recovery path. And that scared me. I didn't want his life. I didn't want to follow in his path. I wanted nothing to do with that. And I wanted to be different. So even when I quit drinking that first year, I never stepped foot in a meeting. Um, I stayed away from Quit Lit. Like I didn't write about my experience at all. I was very afraid of what I would uncover if I did. And so I kind of held on to it like my little secret. I only told my mom and my husband what I was doing, and I didn't even go into detail as to why. And I thought that this is how my life was just going to look like from here on out. It would be my little secret. No one would have to know how far it had gotten. And I would learn to live in deprivation for the rest of my life.
Was that mostly because you didn't really have a good example with your father of what recovery could be?
Oh, absolutely. You would hear people say, uh, some of the more beautiful things about recovery, that there's a sense of freedom, that you feel like an uncaged bird, those things. I didn't believe it because I saw my dad live a life of deprivation in his recovery journey, that was failure after failure after failure. And to not see a different aspect of it only solidified my belief system about not only what's out there and available, but what I don't wanna do and how I don't want it to look.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think the only person I had ever knew of that was in AA was like a friend of the family who his story was that he was in and out. He would last a little while and then go back, sometimes hitting another level of rock bottom in between. So I just thought, well, that's definitely not a path I wanna go down, like, there is nothing redeemable about that person's story, and that was the
Right.
only context I had. Like, I don't think anybody in my family even had ever gotten a DUI or any at least they didn't talk about it, and so I completely understand so many of us come into recovery like that, like, wow, our only sampling is it's not good.
No, and it's what you see in the media, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I remember seeing Nicolas Cage in Leaving Las Vegas and being like, "That's my dad. That is not me."
Oh gosh.
Or seeing Sandra Bullock in, 28 Days and being like, "I don't look like that at all. So
Yeah.
this is not my problem."
Yeah, yeah. I don't identify with that. So how did you make the transition to very publicly deciding to go forward with opening the Sober Mom Squad?
Yeah, so what happened was it started small. It started I think I was 11 months sober, and I was in a writers group, and someone in the group, someone who I loved, as a friend, we were posting about things we were proud of, and she posted, "I am 6 weeks sober, and I am so proud." And I knew this person. Like, I she wasn't my dad, she
Yeah.
wasn't Nicolas Cage, like, she was just this beautiful, warm human being who I respected and admired, and I was like, "Holy crap, we're allowed to be proud of this?" Like,
Mhm.
seriously, it was such a reframe, an instantaneous reframe that my my heart opened up in a way that said, "I can be proud of this. Like, I don't have to be ashamed, I can be proud." And something lit up in me, um, that gave myself permission to say, let's explore this. Like, let's stop trying to hide from it. Let's explore it. And I think that's when I started reading Quit Lit. That's when I started kind of broadening my horizons to see who else is writing about this, and what people are sharing, because I had put these walls around me that not only do I want nothing to do with it, I don't want to be near it, I don't want to read about it because I was afraid I would hear my story in other people's words and it would justify what I was doing when what I really wanted was to convince myself I didn't need to do it. Instead, it made me realize how common this is, how normal this is. And one day when I hit my 1 year, I just bled my heart on the page and wrote about what 1 year has meant to me. And I just threw it out there on my social media and my blog. And I was just like, I'm 1 year sober. I bet you didn't know I had a drinking problem. Let me tell you about it. And I didn't know what was going to come of that. I didn't know if this was going to be a one and done, um, because my niche at that point had been writing about motherhood. It had nothing to do with recovery. But I got I got so many positive responses from that post. So many people saying they felt like I just retold their story. They felt seen for the first time. They recognized maybe they too had a problem, or they saw what I wrote as what their journey was like before they quit. And they offered me so much joy and peace and excitement for my journey ahead. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me to realize, like, I think I've just opened up a brand new door in my writing of where I want to take this and what I want to talk about and how I want to journal this experience. And so I did. I started kind of openly writing about it and writing about my experience. It wasn't till Sober Mom Squad that I had my first real experience with community. I had never, still at that point, been to a meeting, connected with a group of people in that way to talk about recovery. So that was a whole new world for me too, just as it was for a lot of women who were just starting their sober journey. It was the beginning of my community journey when Sober Mom Squad started in, March of 2020.
Yeah, and it was the beginning of so many people's journey into community. Even those of us who had some sober time, we had never quite had a community like that. And I can attest, coming from the rooms of AA, I had some women in some meetings that were, that I'd go to, I'd sit by. I was very close with maybe one or two. But this was different in Sober Mom Squad. This was a different vibe. There were 10, 20, 30 women I would anticipate seeing. And then we started to get to know each other in real life. And it just became this beautiful thing that has since closed. We're recording this on April 30th and it'll air in May, or June. But, you know, it's Sober Mom Squad's closed the doors, and some of us are still kind of mourning that, like that sense of community.
Yeah, endings are hard. I think one of the things that we learn pretty quickly in recovery is the process of grieving and grieving sober. It doesn't, it's not, I wouldn't call it easier when you're sober necessarily, but you do find a way to go through the grieving process in a healthier way. And you have to learn how to say goodbye to things.
Yeah.
And we're pretty good at that in recovery. I think while I'm sad to see this chapter of my recovery journey end, I also am hopeful and open to what else is out there and kind of exploring, what enters my path next. Nobody would have imagined Sober Mom Squad, in February of 2020, right? It was born out of a need. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that we can all do right now is what can we birth out of our current need 5 years later? Regardless of what your recovery path looks like, my needs look very different now than they did
Yeah.
5 years ago. Yours do too. All of ours do. And the question is, what direction do we want to take this new path now? And what I love about recovery and sobriety is the path looks open and clear, in a way that in my drinking days, it felt very dark and rainy and murky.
Yeah.
I have a lot of hope for this next path, even though I have no idea what it looks like. We were talking about before we started recording, like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I will find a new community. I don't know if I will get to host meetings in the future. I hope so. But I also am going to go into it with an open mind. And I just want to um, kind of let the universe send me signs because it's worked
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah, and I said this in our very last meeting, like, one of the things I was grateful for the Sober Mom Squad community was the platform for so many of us to learn something about ourselves, which we would have never known, is that we enjoy hosting meetings and that we are good in front of others and we're good at public speaking. And I would have never thought I would end up as a sobriety coach with, a podcast on this theme. I mean, I kind of wanted to, but the, the trajectory was not something I could have predicted. But I love what you said about how in recovery, we are open because the path is somewhat clear no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, we have our own back no matter what. So there's an openness there. And whatever the universe brings, I've always found when something ends, something better, different, necessary comes along. It's not always perfect, but it is necessary for the next step in whatever growth I'm gonna go through. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think, part of, where we call it a journey is our minds and um our growth. We're evolving over time. And I feel like Sober Mom Squad filled a need for so many
Yes.
of us in a way that I'm looking forward to something new, fulfilling new needs I have. And I don't know what it is yet. I don't even know what the needs are quite yet, but I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I realized my new need was to speak and to teach and to coach. I don't get a lot of teaching in coaching sessions because that is the time for the client to speak. So I've started doing digital courses, creating those on my own. I was just on Kajabi before we hit record. Again, something I would have never felt the deep need to do, but I love to teach. And that is an element that I was missing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so cool. What comes next is just going to be some organic unfolding of what we need.
I love that you got that clarity. I think having that intuition and seeing that kind of blossom in your life through your recovery and your experience and um, the time you've had is is such a testament
Yeah,
to the growth we do have in recovery and how it does kind of open you to being somebody you never imagined yourself to be, um, and doing things you never thought possible.
for sure. Absolutely. And I try to express that in a variety of ways. Everything from writing a fashion blog to the work I've done with the Sober Curator to the Sober Mom Squad, all of the connections and the people. I mean, I have a life I would have never dreamt of. It's just it's bizarre and beautiful all in one sort of weird, messy journey. And I wouldn't change it. Absolutely wouldn't change it.
Bizarre and beautiful. That's perfect.
Yes, yes. So when you were gonna sit down and write your book, there was a lot of talk in Sober Mom Squad about mommy wine culture.
Mhm.
And it seemed like we kind of focused on blaming the wine. Like, alcohol's the devil,
Yeah.
it has all these carcinogens and those were phases, as new studies came out, it was the zeitgeist to talk about XYZ. And so there were times when, it was like, we're drinking rocket fuel and people don't know. And S so in your mind and your story, how did you construct the sort of the bridge from, "No, no, no, this isn't about the wine, this is about the sort of unequal labor load, and maybe this is even a feminist issue."
Mhm.
Dare I say the F word?
Right. Um, yeah, I mean, God, my the topic of my book transformed over time, as you can imagine.
Yep.
Uh, where I think in the beginning it was about the wine. I think when I first wrote the book, the wine was the villain, the villain of my story. But and thank God we didn't publish the book. It was probably a 3-year process to get the book published. And
Yeah.
so much changed over those several years that I really kind of had reframe. I don't know if you remember or you had this experience in your sober journey, but when I first quit drinking, I definitely went through like the 5 stages of grief. And the big stage for me, the stage that I don't know if I'm ever going to get over, is the rage stage. And I was looking for someone to blame. That was not me. And this is a very, I think, pretty common process in early recovery where you're angry and you're a victim and you want to point fingers. And when we were, I think you and I are around the same time frame in our sobriety. When we were probably in the early stages of recovery together, books like Quit Like a Woman and This Naked Mind were very popular, or
Yes.
Just Being Born.
Yes.
And those are very, here's the truth about alcohol.
Yeah.
Very in your face, very transformative messaging that we had never heard before. Almost, I would say, revolutionary, because they took a narrative that we had never heard, which we grew up hearing wine, 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 alcohol, alcohol, it was everywhere. It was at everything. And the 2010s social media exploded with this mommy needs wine meme that just became every mother's marching orders for surviving parenting. And then you have this message of pushback that says, actually, alcohol is the devil.
Yeah.
Actually, alcohol is rocket fuel. It is ethanol. It's a carcinogen. You are drinking diluted poison. And we were all going, yes, yes, yeah, validated. Yes, baby. And I was totally on that train. But, with therapy, with recovery, with more and more messaging, with so much pushback I would get in social media, because I always get pushback, especially when I talked about mommy wine culture, because women would come back and say, first of all, don't touch my wine. Like that's that's my choice. I get to decide. But second of all, your journey is just that, your journey. And it has nothing to do with my experience. And I had my own come to Jesus moment of, okay, so if this is not the devil that we have made it out to be for all of us, what is the common element and why are more women drinking than ever? And that's where I think I started. I remember emailing my agent and being like, I need to talk about the mental load. It was just like, because the underlying layer between a lot of the rage I was holding on to, even as I got further in my recovery, was this idea of the do it all and make it look easy mother
Yeah.
that penetrated all of our social media. That was the narrative we all heard, and the
Yeah.
expectations and the judgments I feel like we all kind of positioned ourselves under. And when I made that connection, it was such an aha moment that this isn't about the wine, because people who don't struggle with wine still have this simmering rage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not coming from ethanol, because they're not drinking that every night like I am. So
Yeah.
where is it coming from? And that's where I think I was really able to dig into the next level of, um, what do we all have in common as women, um, as mothers in today's day and age, that makes us feel so stranded and abandoned, and so many of us, more than ever, reaching for drugs and alcohol to sustain us through a phase of our life that feels unsustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and there's so much validity there. I do remember I didn't have a rage phase, but I did call it my quit like a woman phase, where everything was related back to, like, rocket fuel, and it was alcohol was the devil, and but you're right, there was so much about that book that was groundbreaking, and we'd never heard that before. But ultimately, underneath that, there is this there's this woman who is sort of beaten down and exhausted and burned out. I've seen you talk about burnout a lot. And what I see with the work I've done with clients is sort of this loop of burnout. So there's drinking because they need to numb, they need to relax, they need a break, essentially. And then from there, there's guilt, and then there's sort of over overdoing, overproducing, people pleasing from the guilt, and it just becomes, and then back to the drinking, and it just becomes this loop.
It's a great
And so,
description.
yeah, I was hoping you would talk a little bit about how you researched for this book in preparing for um, the discussions around burnout and the mental load.
Yeah, I mean, the discussions when I started researching for the book, the discussions around emotional labor, around the mental load, around household labor,
Yeah.
and unequal household labor based on gender were just starting to hit mainstream. I believe that the terms had been around for a while, but they were gaining in popularity right around the time that I started writing the book. And so there was not a lot to pull from as far as research. The main books I turned to on the mental load component was Fed Up by Gemma Hartley and Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. Those were the two main books I based the research on the why. Why are we turning to alcohol? What is at the root of this problem we are all seemingly facing? And this idea that now, I mean, I say these words now, mental load, emotional labor, these things that everyone knows what I'm talking about. Weaponized incompetence, like everyone knows what these are now. But 5 years ago, these were very novel concepts that most people didn't understand. I would argue, or at least needed clarity on what we meant. And even now, when I talk about unequal household labor, I get tons of pushback, mostly from men going, um, talk to me about household labor next time you need your lawn mowed. Like there's just lack of understanding around why there is a disconnect in heterosexual cishet partnerships right now, and how do we overcome it? So there was a lot of learning in that, and then connecting what I learned between that and what we're seeing with the statistics around alcohol. For some of this, I had to use different census data, and we got some really good census data from COVID when we saw so many women leave the workforce. And the questions as to why is that? Why did we have to create Sober Mom Squad out of thin air? And why are so many people saying there's no other support available to help them through this period? Do you remember like Trader Joe's like having that sign over its wine aisle saying get your homeschooling supplies here?
No.
I mean, this was the world of COVID. I mean, this is what we were dealing with.
My gosh.
The solution to the mental load in 2020 was alcohol companies jumping,
Yes.
leaping to try to fix the situation. And I saw this amazing meme once that said something to the effect that the only people showing any sort of concern or support for mothers right now is the alcohol industry. And it
Yes.
hit me, like a ton of bricks because that's what it felt like. It felt like the only people listening, the only people offering sympathy or a solution at that time, um, were wine and alcohol companies. And what does that tell you?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, now, I feel like it's just a very different world, and we still have such a long ways to go when it comes to equitable labor and fixing the gender divide around childcare and all those things. But it's an active part of the discussion in a way that it wasn't even just a few years ago.
Yeah. So if you could give our listeners here maybe an action item, because you've clearly highlighted the problem, but what's something you suggest as a remedy, as a solution or a way out?
I think the the one thing that has made the biggest difference in my own experience in my household has been better communication with my
Mm,
partner.
mhm.
Um, you can't passive aggressive your way out of this. You
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
and you certainly can't drink your way around it, which was my strategy for several years. It does require a conversation, multiple conversations, especially as things change. And I think that can be really hard for women because, in some ways, it feels like we are asking for help or like we aren't, that we can't do it on our own.
Yeah,
In a hustle culture, in a do it all world that wants women and mothers to do it all on their own. So for me, it was definitely some humble pie of having to say, this isn't working and we need to make significant changes. And I mean, that's really where the shift starts.
mhm.
Uh, but alcohol did not help me um, ignore the problem. Alcohol did not help me numb out my feelings, my anger, my resentments. If anything, it just let it build up and get worse over time, to blowing points, that never served any marriage. So I would always say it has to start there. Then you have the additional tools of things like marriage counseling
Yeah,
and these books that are available. My husband and I just got the Fair Play deck of cards, as an experiment because I include them in my book as a suggestion. I've heard great things about them, and it's a, a deck of 100 cards of all the household responsibilities. And you dole them out based on who's in charge of what. And you look at the stacks and you compare them and you say, how do we make this more equitable? How do we make this more sustainable for both of us? And I love the visual in and of itself, but also it's a solution based approach that
mhm.
I think every couple needs in some way.
Yeah, and I love that you took ownership of your part in this. First and foremost was that you had to eat some humble pie and ask for help. You had to recognize that you were trying to do it all. And so your part of this was to verbalize what you needed and to be brave enough to say, yeah, I can't freaking do it all. There's just no way. And know that as a sober woman, you're going to remember these conversations with your husband. You are not just spewing drunken slurs, you know? So often we get gaslit for our lack of memory when we're drinking because we're such easy targets when we're blackout drinking. Anybody can say we did anything and we would believe them.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
you're already standing in your power as a sober woman and then taking ownership of, yeah, I needed to say it out loud. I mean, not to blame men for every part of it because yes, there is an unfair divide, but as women, we do have to speak up.
Well,
Mhm.
and I know that people will say I shouldn't have to ask my husband for help. And I wanna
Yeah.
clarify that because if you, like I did, the minute the baby was born, say, take a step back.
Yeah.
This is mine. I'm not, not to that
Yeah.
extent,
I get
but
it.
I'm going to do all the things. Like, this is going to be so seamless. Like, you are going to sit in the background, because I have been dreaming of being this kind of mom since I was a kid. And I'm gonna do the breastfeeding. I'm gonna do the feeding. I'm gonna make the meals. I'm gonna go groceries. I'm gonna do it all.
Yeah.
I will let you know if I need your help. That is how I approached early motherhood, which,
Mhm.
number one, no wonder I burnt out so fast. But number two, then to get resentful and furious when my husband stopped trying to step in at all because I would bite his head off.
Yeah.
That I did that. He
Yeah.
didn't do that. I did that. And I did have to say, I tried to bite off more than I could chew. And it was hard for me to admit that because part of me did believe this made me lesser of a mom than I had envisioned for myself. And my husband, he, for him, I think it was more of a sense of relief because he wanted he wanted to be a dad. He
Yeah.
wanted to be an active part of our family, and I had been pushing him off. I had been the one kind of forcing his hand back. And, in that regard, I do think you need to kind of say, if you get to that place, that I was wrong.
Yeah.
I had a vision for how this should look, and I've changed my mind
Yeah.
because it's not working.
Absolutely. So I've been dying to ask you what you think when we're talking about labor divides and women either not working or working. The recent shift in our political scene has, I think, given rise to this hashtag tradwives, um, where, there's these traditional roles. Of course, they're younger women. I think they're in the honeymoon phase of their marriage, and when they can cosplay a 1950s wife, putting on this, like, vintage dress, baking pies on the internet. Um, and I was just curious to see what your thoughts on that were, or if you've experienced any pushback on your narrative from that new, let's be trad wife, stay at home mom, do all the things, not ask for help. I mean, that's sort of the narrative now. It's so weird.
Right, it feels like we're going backwards in some ways,
We are.
especially when I grew up, being told to go break glass ceilings,
Yes, exactly,
and
exactly.
that was the dream, and now, we're seeing, especially, like, on our For You pages, kind of this step back in time to these more old school approaches of, women in milkmaid dresses, sourdough starters. To be fair, there's some shaming of women who have their kids in childcare and women who dare to let other people help them raise their children. Um, God forbid we have a village of support. It really reminds me of kind of old school American pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality and this dire need for individualism
Yes.
at any cost, like even to your mental health. Like you do it all, you do it yourself. You grow your own farm, you raise your own chickens, and you take care of your own kids, and you live in a bubble. And I think it's founded I mean, there's a lot of things it's founded on, but besides the political side of it,
Mhm.
it's founded for this desire of minimalism in such an over-consumerist world,
Yeah.
where we do just want simplicity. The idea of not having to drive your kids back and forth from daycare in between getting to work and appointments and meetings does sound nice. I mean, it
Yes.
sounds like you're taking less off you're taking things off your plate. You
Yeah.
are simplifying, and
Yeah.
I think we're losing kind of our sight on what the end goal is between simplifying versus identifying and
Mm.
finding this identity as um, a I just always think of a Proverbs 31 woman. This idea that a woman's job is to serve a husband. And that when I see trad wives, I can't help but my head go there because I do think some of the messaging, especially when you see it coming from some of the more religious side of the social media or the media in general does have very religious elements, and that sends shivers down my spine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but, what worries me most, taking this back to kind of the topic at hand is when you do put yourself in this, I can do it all, I don't need help mentality, you are going to be more inclined to fail. Motherhood is not meant to be done in a bubble. It never has been. And, I was reading these stats that mothers never were stay-at-home moms back in history. This is a newer concept that started in the 40s and 50s. That prior to that, women worked. I mean, they worked around the home. They did farming. They did seamstressing. They were constantly working. That this idea that a woman's job is to be home and cater to their kids uh, as a be all end all is not rooted in history. And we have to keep that in mind when we see these messages and we see these stories. Who is benefiting off this message? Because a woman who is, whether she sees it or not, trapped in a house with no income and no escape route if things go south, might not work out in her best interest. And
Yeah.
that's the feminist in me coming out.
Absolutely. I love that you said ultimately who is benefiting from this model or and again, I see it as cosplay. I see it as a bit of nostalgia for a time that people aren't really sure I don't think they really understand why would we cosplay a time when we wore bad dresses and we couldn't even own a credit card. You
Right.
know, it's a very interesting, I think, for our generation because we were sandwiched in with that. Our mothers and grandmothers fought super hard for us to wear pants and
Yes.
vote and have a credit card. And, I was raised and you bust the glass ceiling. And somewhere along the line, it got a little bit confusing because it was like, be a mom, do it all around the house, and also, you know, climb the ranks at work. And so I think
Yeah.
you were onto something when you said it's a sign of burnout in a sense that it's people craving simplicity.
Right. And I think if we keep it that simple framing, you can still strive for that without losing your identity, without giving up our our rights, and keeping ourselves safe and secure for a plan B or for a plan C. We always need to look out for ourselves as women,
Absolutely.
because no one else is going to. We've seen that.
Yeah.
History has shown us. My grandma told me that all the time. And it's a funny place for me to be now because I I grew up like that. I have been in corporate America for 20 years, and I'm currently a stay-at-home mom. Um, and this has been such a, I don't know, it's like the universe is winking and laughing at me because this is never something I intended, but we had to make some very significant choices for the sake of my son who has a disability. And again, I find myself kind of having to reframe what my roadmap looks like and trying to understand like what my goals were as a feminist, as someone who's breaking glass ceilings to now being home, navigating a whole new path. What what can I shape new goals to look like that suit me now? Without losing my identity in the process. And that's something I'm currently working through. Like, I don't have any answers.
Yeah, that's the next podcast. How to
Yeah.
be a stay-at-home mom and a feminist and
Yeah.
sober.
Yeah. I'll let you know when I find out.
Well, I could talk to you forever, and I know in just respecting of time, we're getting near the end here, but where can people find you if they want to connect with you? And of course, I'll put this in the show notes as well.
I right now I'm kind of living a world. I'm kind of floating in between different realms, but occasionally I will say something on Instagram or Facebook, or I'll throw a random thought out on TikTok. I have a Substack, but I'm currently taking a break on that. Um, life has been lifing lately. You can just kind of catch me on the in between till I have like a firmer plan in place until, I decide what the next step of my journey is going to be. But yeah, it's a little bit everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, I thank you for your honesty about that. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. We can certainly extend this to like a 3-part series because there's so many other questions I have for you.
Totally.
But yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to wrap this up now. So thank you so much, Celeste.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks for tuning in. You can find me on my website at katevitella.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Kate Vitella. I would love to hear from you. Any feedback or questions, shoot me a note. So until next time, peace within and bullshit out.